The champagne on his breath was stale, but the victory tasted sweet. Gavin Mercer thought he had committed the perfect crime, a night of passion with his mistress, a seamless lie ready for his wife, and a life where he answered to no one. He drove home under the rising sun, expecting to find his wife, Evander, asleep in her usual naive silence, and his newborn son in the crib. He was wrong. The key didn't fit. The locks were changed, and when the door finally opened, it wasn't his wife standing there. It was a stranger holding a deed of sale. Gavin didn't know it yet, but his life hadn't just changed, it had been liquidated. This is the story of a man who thought he was the king, only to find out the queen had burned the castle down while he was sleeping. The Porsche Cayenne tore down the I-95, the engine purring a low, aggressive growl that matched the rhythm of Gavin Mercer's heartbeat. It was 6:43 a.m. on a Tuesday in late October. The sky over Seattle was a bruised purple, threatening rain. But inside the climate-controlled cabin of his luxury SUV, Gavin felt nothing but the warm, lingering high of the previous night. He glanced at his reflection in the rearview mirror. At 34, he possessed the kind of sharp, predatory handsomeness that opened doors in corporate boardrooms and closed deals in dimly lit hotel bars. He wiped a faint smudge of lipstick, sienna's shade, crimson heat, off his jawline. Sienna. She was everything his wife wasn't, fiery, demanding, and dangerously exciting. She was his executive assistant, 22, and entirely obsessed with him. One last time, he had told himself for the past 6 months. But last night at the Grand Hyatt, amidst tangled sheets and room service champagne, he knew he wasn't going to stop. Why should he? He was Gavin Mercer. He provided the lifestyle. He paid the bills. If he wanted a little side entertainment, he deserved it. He turned off the highway and navigated the winding, tree-lined streets of Bellevue. This was old money territory, where the driveways were long and the secrets were deep. He approached his house, 42 Oak Creek Drive. It was a sprawling, contemporary masterpiece of glass and cedar that he had purchased 3 years ago. It was the symbol of his success. He rehearsed his lie as he pulled into the driveway. The merger talks with the Tokyo partners went late, Evander. I crashed at the office couch so I wouldn't wake you and Leo up. It was a solid lie. Evander never checked. Evander, with her messy buns, milk-stained t-shirts, and perpetual exhaustion since Leo was born 3 months ago, would just nod and ask if he wanted coffee. She was soft, malleable, safe. Gavin frowned as he pressed the garage door opener, clipped to his visor. Nothing happened. He pressed it again, harder. The heavy cedar door didn't budge. Piece of junk, he muttered, slamming the remote against the dashboard. Battery probably died. He parked the Porsche in the driveway, annoyed that he would have to walk to the front door in the drizzle that had just started. He grabbed his briefcase, locked the car, and strode up the slate walkway. He fished his house key from his pocket, a heavy brass key he'd had custom made, and slid it into the lock. It only went in halfway. Gavin jiggled it. He pulled it out and tried again, jamming it with force. It hit a blockage. What the hell? He stepped back, looking up at the house. The blinds were drawn, which was odd. Usually, Evander had the nursery blinds open by 6 a.m. to let the morning light wake Leo gently. He rang the doorbell. Once, twice. Then he pounded on the mahogany wood with the flat of his hand. "Evander, open the door! The lock is jammed!" He waited. Silence. He pounded again, harder this time, anger flushing his neck. "Evander, wake up!" Suddenly, the lock clicked from the inside. Gavin let out a huff of breath, adjusting his tie. "About time. I don't know what's wrong with the..." The door swung open. Gavin's words died in his throat. Standing in the doorway was not Evander. It wasn't his petite, blonde wife with dark circles under her eyes. It was a man. A large man, perhaps in his 50s, wearing a flannel robe and holding a half-eaten piece of toast. He looked at Gavin with confusion and mild irritation. "Can I help you?" the stranger asked, chewing slowly. Gavin blinked, his brain misfiring. "Who are you?" The man frowned. "I think the better question is, who are you? And why are you banging on my door at 7 in the morning?" Gavin let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Your door? Buddy, get out of my way. Is this some kind of joke? Did Evander hire a handyman? Evander!" He tried to push past the man. The stranger didn't budge. He blocked the entrance with a surprising amount of strength. "Whoa, hold on there. There is no Evander here." "This is my house," Gavin snarled, his patience evaporating. "I am Gavin Mercer. I own this property. Now move, or I'll call the police." The man in the robe stared at him for a beat, then his expression shifted from annoyance to pity. "Mr. Mercer?" the man asked. "Yes." "Finally." "We bought this house yesterday," the man said calmly. "Closed at 4 p.m. We moved in last night. We have the keys. We have the deed. This isn't your house anymore." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The sound of the rain intensified, drowning out the blood rushing in Gavin's ears. "That's impossible," Gavin whispered. "I didn't sell it." "Well," the man took another bite of toast. "Your wife certainly did." Gavin stood frozen on the porch, the damp chill of the Seattle morning seeping into his expensive Italian suit. "My wife? Sold it?" "Look, pal," the new owner, who introduced himself as Mr. Henderson, said, stepping back slightly, but keeping a hand on the doorframe. "I don't know what your domestic situation is, but everything was above board. Title company, lawyers, the works. Quick sale, cash offer. We got a great deal because she wanted a fast close." Fast close. The words echoed in Gavin's mind. "Where is she?" Gavin demanded, his voice rising. "Where is Evander? Where is my son?" "I don't know," Henderson shrugged. "The house was empty when we did the final walkthrough at 3 p.m. Staged beautifully, but empty of personal effects. Now please, leave my property before I call the cops." Mr. Henderson shut the door firmly. The click of the deadbolt was the loudest sound Gavin had ever heard. Gavin stumbled back to his Porsche. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped his keys on the wet pavement. He snatched them up and scrambled inside the car, locking the doors as if the reality outside couldn't touch him in there. He grabbed his phone. He dialed Evander. "The number you have reached is no longer in service." He stared at the screen. No longer in service? She had this number for 10 years. He dialed the landline, a habit. "We're sorry." He opened his banking app. He needed to see the deposit. If she sold the house, there would be money. The house was valued at $2.4 million. Even with the remaining mortgage, there should be over $1 million in equity. He logged into Mercer Family Trust, the joint account where they kept their liquid assets. Access denied. He tried again. User ID not recognized. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at his throat. He switched to his personal checking account, the one he used to pay for dinners with Sienna, the one he thought was secret. He logged in. Balance, $42.18. His stomach dropped. Yesterday there had been $65,000 in that account. He scrolled through the transaction history. Transfer out, $64,950. Destination, external account ending in 8890. Date, yesterday, 4:55 p.m. "No!" he gasped, hitting the steering wheel. "No, no, no!" He frantically dialed the only other number that mattered, Arthur Pendergast, his family attorney. Arthur picked up on the second ring. "Gavin?" "Arthur. Thank God. Something is happening. I'm at the house, but some guy says he bought it. Evander isn't here." My passwords aren't working. You need to— Gavin, stop! Arthur's voice was clipped, devoid of its usual warmth. I can't represent you anymore. What? I received a conflict of interest notice yesterday. I am representing the interests of the Mercer estate as designated by the primary trustee. I am the primary trustee, Gavin screamed. Not since last February, Gavin. Remember, Arthur said, his voice dropping lower. When you were facing that sexual harassment lawsuit from your former secretary, you transferred power of attorney and full trustee status to Evander to protect the assets from being seized in litigation. You put the house, the accounts, and the portfolio in her name solely. You said, and I quote, "She's too stupid to steal it. It's safer with her than the courts." The memory hit Gavin like a physical blow. He had done that. He was so terrified of losing his bonus and reputation that he had hidden everything behind Evander's clean record. He had made her the sole owner of their life, convinced she was nothing more than a glorified nanny who worshipped the ground he walked on. She executed the power of attorney, Arthur continued, sounding almost impressed. She liquidated the assets. It's all legal, Gavin. She didn't steal anything. Legally, it was already hers. Where is she, Arthur? Gavin's voice broke. She has my son. She has Leo. I don't know where she is, but a courier just dropped off a packet for you at my office. It's divorce papers and a restraining order. Gavin ended the call. He sat in the silence of the luxury car that he suddenly wasn't sure he could afford to put gas in. He looked out the window at the house. The nursery window on the second floor, the one where he had watched Leo sleep just 2 days ago, was dark. She was gone, and she hadn't just left. She had erased him. But Gavin Mercer was not a man who accepted defeat. He was a fighter. A shark. You want to play, Evander? He whispered to the empty air, his eyes narrowing. You think you can take my son and my money and run? I will find you, and I will ruin you. He started the car. He had to go to the office. He needed to regroup. He needed Sienna. Sienna would help him fix this. She was smart, she was connected, and she loved him. He put the car in reverse, unaware that the nightmare was only just beginning. The drive to downtown Seattle was a blur of aggressive lane changes and honking horns. Gavin's mind was racing, formulating a plan. Ideally, he would go to the office, access the offshore accounts he had never told Arthur or Evander about, the rainy day crypto wallets, and hire a private investigator. He would find her in 24 hours. She was a nursing school dropout who liked knitting. She wasn't Jason Bourne. He pulled into the underground parking garage of the monolith glass tower where Stratton Oakmont Logistics, no relation to the movie, just a pretentious name his boss loved, occupied the top 3 floors. Gavin was the senior VP of sales. He was the golden boy. He swiped his badge at the gate. Beep, beep, beep. Red light. He swiped again. Beep, beep, beep. Red light. Come on, he yelled. He rolled down the window and pressed the intercom button for security. Hey, it's Mercer. Gate's acting up. There was a pause, static crackling. Then, a voice he didn't recognize. Mr. Mercer, please reverse your vehicle and exit the premises. Excuse me. This is the VP of sales. Open the gate. I have strict orders, sir. Your access has been revoked, pending an internal investigation. HR has messaged that you are not allowed in the building. Gavin's blood ran cold. Investigation? What investigation? Please exit the premises, or we will have to call the towing company. Gavin slammed the car into reverse, nearly hitting a concrete pillar. He spun the car around and parked on the street, feeding the meter with the loose change he found in the cup holder, because he was terrified to use his credit card. He stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the building. He pulled out his phone and called Sienna. She would know what was happening. She was inside. She picked up on the first ring. "Gavin?" Her voice was a hushed whisper. "Sienna, baby, listen to me. Something insane is happening. Evander, she went crazy. She locked me out of the house, and now my badge isn't working. What's going on up there?" "You need to stop calling me," Sienna hissed. Gavin paused. "What?" "The board is here, Gavin. Someone sent them the emails." "What emails?" "The emails between us, and the invoices, the ones where you inflated the shipping costs to the vendors and siphoned the difference into your shell company." Gavin felt the sidewalk sway beneath him. Those were encrypted. Nobody had access to those except me. "And Evander," Sienna said, her voice trembling. "Did she use your laptop? Did you ever leave it open?" He thought back. Sunday night. He had been in the shower. He left his laptop on the kitchen island. Evander had been baking cookies. She said she was looking up a recipe. She wasn't looking up a recipe. "She sent everything to the CEO this morning at 8 a.m., Sienna continued. "Gavin, they're talking about embezzlement. They're talking about the FBI. And she sent the photos of us. To everyone. The whole office knows." "Sienna, you have to help me," Gavin pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. "I have nowhere to go. I'm coming to your apartment. We can figure this out." "My apartment?" Sienna let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "Gavin, you're fired. You're broke, and you're likely going to prison. I'm not going down with you. I'm telling HR you coerced me. I'm the victim here." You loved me," Gavin stammered. "I loved the trips to Paris," Sienna corrected. "I loved the jewelry. You can't buy me jewelry anymore, Gavin. Lose my number." Click. Gavin stood on the busy Seattle street, the phone hanging loosely by his side. People walked past him, businessmen in suits, tourists with umbrellas, completely unaware that the man standing next to the meter had just ceased to exist. He had no home. He had no job. He had no money. He had no mistress. And somewhere out there in the vast world, a woman he had underestimated for 5 years was holding his son and watching his world burn. A notification pinged on his phone. It was an email, not from work, not from the bank. It was from a generic Gmail address, phoenixrising8date@gmail.com. Subject, checkmate. Gavin's thumb hovered over the screen. He opened it. There was no text, just a photo. It was a picture of a dumpster behind a convenience store. Inside the dumpster, sitting atop a pile of trash, was his prized collection of vintage golf clubs, the ones worth $15,000. And beneath the clubs, a small, handwritten note was visible. "You wanted a new life. Now you have one. Start walking." Gavin looked at the Porsche. The gas light dinged. 15 miles to empty. The downfall of Gavin Mercer was not a slow slide. It was a cliff dive. By 2 p.m. that same Tuesday, the Porsche Cayenne was gone. Gavin had parked it in a loading zone while he tried to pawn his Breitling watch at a seedy shop on 3rd Avenue. When he came out, clutching a wad of cash that was a third of what the watch was worth, $500 for a $6,000 timepiece, the spot was empty. He called the police, screaming about theft. The dispatcher, a woman named Officer Brenda, calmly informed him that the vehicle had been repossessed by the leasing agency via GPS tracking. The lease was in the company's name, and Stratton Oakmont had terminated the agreement effective immediately upon his firing. He was stranded in downtown Seattle in a ruined Italian suit, carrying a briefcase filled with useless papers and a phone that was rapidly dying. He checked into the Emerald City Inn, a motel on Aurora Avenue known more for its hourly rates than its amenities. He paid cash for 3 nights. The room smelled of stale smoke and bleach. He sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, the neon sign outside flickering red light across his face. "Think, Gavin. Think," he muttered, pacing the small room. He needed a lawyer who wasn't Arthur Pendergast. He opened the phone book, an archaic thing in the nightstand drawer, and found a listing for Donovan and Associates, aggressive criminal defense, and family law. He called. A paralegal answered. "I need to speak to Mr. Donovan. This is Gavin Mercer. It's an emergency involving asset seizure and kidnapping." "Consultation fee is $500. Up front," the voice drawled. "Fine, I'll be there in an hour." The meeting was a disaster. Patrick Donovan was a greasy man in a strip mall office who listened to Gavin's story with a skeptical brow. "So, let me get this straight," Donovan said, leaning back in his creaky leather chair. "You signed a power of attorney to your wife. You gave her trustee status. And you admitted, on record, via email, to embezzling company funds to pay for a mistress." "I didn't admit to it. She hacked my accounts," Gavin argued. "Mr. Mercer, in the eyes of the law, you handed her the gun, loaded it, and pointed it at your own head. The house sale? Legal. The bank transfers? Legal under the POA? The firing? Justified cause. What about my son?" Gavin slammed his hand on the desk. "She kidnapped Leo." "Did she?" Donovan picked up a piece of paper from his fax machine. "Because while you were in the waiting room, I did a quick docket search. There was an emergency custody hearing this morning at 9:02 a.m. Judge Harold B. Waith presided. You didn't show up. I didn't know about it. You were served via email. In the modern court system, that's enough. Judge Waith granted Mrs. Evander Mercer full legal and physical custody. You have a restraining order against you. If you go near them, you go to jail." Gavin felt the blood drain from his face. "So you're saying I can't do anything?" "I'm saying," Donovan stood up, signaling the end of the meeting, "that unless you have a retainer of $50,000 to start a very long, very uphill battle, you should probably focus on staying out of federal prison for the embezzlement." Gavin walked out of the office into the pouring rain. He had $900 left. He spent the next 2 days in the motel room, drinking cheap whiskey and obsessively refreshing Evander's social media pages. Deleted. All of them. He checked Sienna's Instagram. She was already posting stories from a yacht in Miami with a new guy, some tech bro from Silicon Valley. The caption read, "Finally free of the toxic dead weight. Living my best life." Rage, hot and blinding, began to replace the despair. They all thought he was done. They thought he was just a suit, a checkbook. But Gavin had grown up poor in Chicago before he reinvented himself. He knew how to survive in the gutter. "You want a war, Evander?" he whispered to the cracked ceiling mirror. "I'll give you a war." He stopped drinking. He washed his face. He put on the wrinkled suit. He had one advantage left. He knew Evander's secrets. Or at least, he knew where she kept them. Evander had an old aunt, Aunt Marge, who lived in a nursing home in Spokane. Evander paid for the facility. If Evander was gone, she would still have to pay for Marge. Gavin checked out of the motel. He had enough cash for a Greyhound bus ticket to Spokane. It was a long shot, a desperate Hail Mary. But it was all he had. The bus ride was a humid nightmare of coughing passengers and the smell of diesel. Gavin Mercer, formerly a man who flew exclusively business class, sat squeezed between a heavy-set woman knitting a scarf and a teenager listening to leaking headphones. He stared out the window as the lush greenery of the coast gave way to the dry, brown plains of eastern Washington. He arrived in Spokane at dusk. He took a cab to Sunny Acres Assisted Living. He walked up to the reception desk, turning on the charm that had closed $1 million in sales the previous year. "Good evening," he smiled at the nurse, though his eyes were tired. "I'm Gavin Mercer. I'm here to see my aunt, Marjorie Banks. My wife, Evander usually handles the visits, but, well, I wanted to surprise her. The nurse, a kind-faced woman named Beatrice, frowned. Mr. Mercer, oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry? Gavin's heart skipped a beat. Did she pass away? No, Marge is fine. But Mrs. Mercer moved her. Moved her? Yes, 3 days ago. A private medical transport came. Very fancy. They transferred her to a facility in... Oh, let me check the file. Beatrice tapped on her keyboard. Gavin held his breath, praying she wouldn't ask for ID or notice his dishevelled appearance. Here it is, Beatrice said. She was transferred to the Pines Memory Care Center. And where is that? Gavin asked, his voice tight. It's in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Wyoming. Evander hated the cold. She hated the country. Why Wyoming? Did she leave a contact number? Gavin pressed. Just a forwarding address for the billing. It's a P.O. box in Jackson. Gavin thanked her and walked out. Wyoming. It was perfect. Remote. Wealthy. A place where people went to disappear. He counted his money. $120. Not enough for a plane. Not enough for a bus that far. He went to a truck stop on the edge of town. He found a long-haul trucker, a guy named Red with a rig full of timber headed for Denver. I can get you as far as Casper, Red grunted, eyeing Gavin's suit. You running from the law? Running from a crazy ex-wife? Gavin lied. Red laughed. Hop in, brother. We've all been there. The journey took 2 days. Gavin slept sitting up in the cab, eating beef jerky and listening to Red talk about government conspiracies. When he was dropped off in Wyoming, the air was crisp and smelled of pine and snow. He hitchhiked the rest of the way to Jackson Hole. He arrived on a Friday afternoon. He looked like a vagrant, unshaven, his suit stained, his eyes wild. He found the post office and staked it out. He waited for 3 hours. Finally, he saw it. Not Evander, but a car he recognized. It wasn't a Porsche or a Mercedes. It was a Subaru Outback. Sensible, rugged. But the driver was a man he had never seen before. A tall, rugged man in a shearling coat, loading a box of mail into the passenger seat. Gavin followed the car on foot as it pulled out, but he couldn't keep up. He memorized the license plate. WY44498. He went to the local library and used the public computer. He used a search engine to run the plate, a service that cost him his last $20 on a prepaid debit card he bought. The car was registered to a Lucas Bennett. Address 1204 Shadow Ridge Lane, Jackson, WY. Gavin zoomed in on the map. It was a secluded cabin about 5 miles out of town. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't have a plan. He just had the burning need to see her face when she realized she hadn't killed him. He began the long walk up the mountain road as the sun began to set, casting long, jagged shadows across the snow. The final leg of Gavin Mercer's journey was a physical dismantling of the man he used to be. The hitchhiked ride had dropped him at the base of Shadow Ridge Lane, leaving him to navigate the winding, incline road on foot. The sun had long since dipped below the Teton Range, dragging a curtain of violet bruised darkness across the sky. The temperature was plummeting, a dry, biting cold that didn't just chill the skin, but seemed to brittle the bones. Gavin's Italian leather loafers, designed for the plush carpets of boardrooms and the pavement of valet stands, slipped treacherously on the packed snow. His suit, once a tailored armor of charcoal wool, was now a stained, wrinkled rag that offered zero protection against the Wyoming winter. He hugged his briefcase to his chest, a useless reflex, as it contained nothing of value anymore, and trudged upward. Every breath was a painful cloud of steam, a reminder of how far he was from the climate-controlled existence he felt entitled to. He rounded the final bend, and the house revealed itself. It wasn't the rustic shack he had pictured in his bitter fantasies. It was a stunning A-frame structure, an architectural marriage of glass and dark timber that jutted out from the mountainside like a ship's prow. It was modern, expensive, and imposing. But what struck Gavin hardest was the light. Massive floor-to-ceiling windows glowed with a warm, golden radiance that spilled out onto the snow, cutting through the blue dark. It looked like a lantern in the void. It looked like a home. Gavin stumbled off the road, ducking behind a cluster of thick pines about 20 yards from the house. He was shivering violently now, his teeth chattering in a rhythm he couldn't control, but the fire of his rage kept him upright. He peered through the branches, his eyes fixated on the brightly lit stage of the living room. He saw her. Evander moved through the room with a grace he hadn't seen in years. In Seattle, she had become ghost-like, hugging the walls, her posture slumped with the weight of new motherhood and his neglect. But here, framed by the timber beams, she looked vibrant. She had cut her hair. The long, messy blonde waves were gone, replaced by a sharp, chic bob that framed her jawline. She was wearing a thick, cream-colored, cable-knit sweater and holding a glass of wine. She wasn't alone. A man walked into the frame. Gavin's hands clenched into fists, his fingernails digging into his palms. It was the driver of the Subaru, the man from the post office. He was tall, with the kind of broad shoulders and rugged build that suggested he chopped his own wood rather than paid someone to do it. He wore a flannel shirt and jeans, simple, unpretentious, and infuriatingly masculine. Gavin watched, paralyzed by voyeuristic torture, as the man said something that made Evander throw her head back and laugh. It was a genuine laugh, full-throated and free. Then the man stepped closer. He placed a hand on Evander's shoulder, a gesture of easy familiarity. Evander didn't flinch. She leaned into his touch, resting her hand over his. The sight snapped something inside Gavin's frozen chest. She had replaced him. In less than a week, she had not only liquidated his life, but had installed a replacement in a cozy mountain fortress funded by his money. The hypocrisy was suffocating. She had judged him for Sienna. She had destroyed him for a fling, all while harboring a secret lover in the mountains. "You liar," Gavin hissed, the wind snatching the words from his lips. "You self-righteous little liar." He scanned the room frantically. Where was the crib? Where was the playpen? He saw expensive rugs, a roaring stone fireplace, and a sleek kitchen island, but no sign of a 3-month-old infant. Panic mixed with the rage. Had she abandoned Leo to run off with this lumberjack? He couldn't hide in the trees anymore. The cold was killing him, but the heat of his indignation was stronger. He stumbled out of the tree line, his frozen feet crunching loudly on the snow crust. He didn't care about stealth. He wanted to shatter their domestic bliss. He wanted them to feel the fear he had lived with for the last 3 days. He marched up the wooden steps to the expansive deck. He reached the heavy oak door and didn't bother looking for a doorbell. He raised his fist, numb and blue, and hammered it against the wood. Bang! 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 Inside, the laughter died instantly. Through the side window, Gavin saw the man turn sharply towards the door. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed. He said something to Evander, positioning himself between her and the entrance. The lock clicked. The door swung inward. The rush of heat that escaped the house was intoxicating, smelling of roasting chicken, cedar, and expensive red wine. It hit Gavin's face like a physical wall. Standing in the doorway, blocking the warmth, was the man. Up close, he was even bigger than he looked from the road. He looked down at Gavin with eyes that were hard and unimpressed. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his voice a low rumble. Gavin tried to summon the commanding presence of a senior vice president, but it was hard when his jaw was trembling uncontrollably. "Get out of my way," he chattered, his voice thin and reedy. "I want to see my wife." The man didn't budge an inch. He crossed his arms over his chest. "I don't know who you are, pal, but you're trespassing. Turn around and walk back down that driveway before I help you down it." "I am Gavin Mercer," Gavin screamed, the sound cracking. "I own this house. I own everything in it. Evander, get out here." He tried to shove past the man, a desperate, clumsy lunge. It was like shoving a boulder. The man simply caught Gavin by the lapels of his ruined suit and shoved him backward. Gavin's feet slipped on the icy deck, and he went down hard, sprawling onto his back in the snow. "Stay down," the man warned, stepping onto the porch. "Gavin?" The voice came from inside the house, soft, calm, and terrifyingly composed. Evander stepped into the doorway, peering past the man's shoulder. She wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself against the draft. Her eyes landed on Gavin, shivering in the snow. There was no fear in her expression. There was no guilt. There was only a dull, weary disappointment. "Hello, Gavin," she said. Gavin scrambled to his elbows, snow clinging to his hair and eyelashes. "You," he choked out. "You stole everything. You stole my money. You sold my house. You kidnapped my son." Evander stepped out onto the porch, ignoring the cold. She looked down at him like he was a stranger who had caused a minor fender bender. "I didn't kidnap anyone," she said evenly. "I have full custody. The court order was clear." "Where is he?" Gavin yelled, struggling to his feet, his legs shaking from exhaustion. "Where is Leo? I don't see him in there. Did you sell him too? Is he even here?" Evander's face remained impassive. "Leo isn't here, Gavin." "What did you do with him?" Gavin lunged forward again, but the man blocked him with a raised forearm. "Did you leave him with a nanny while you played house with your boyfriend here?" "Leo is safe," Evander said, her voice dropping a register, becoming steel. "He is with his parents." Gavin froze, the words not computing. "I am his parent." Evander shook her head slowly. It was a small, finalized movement. "No, Gavin, you're not. And you never were." The wind howled through the pines, filling the silence that stretched between them. What are you talking about?" Gavin whispered. Evander sighed, glancing at the man beside her. "Lucas, let him in. If he stays out here, he'll freeze to death. And I don't want a corpse on my driveway explaining things to the sheriff." Lucas looked at Gavin with disgust, but stepped aside. "One wrong move," he warned, "and you go through the window." Gavin limped into the cabin. The warmth was overwhelming, making his frozen skin prickle and burn. He stood on the expensive Persian rug, dripping meltwater, a muddy stain on their perfect evening. "Explain," he demanded, though the command lacked all authority. He sounded like a child asking why he was in trouble. Evander walked to the living room seating area. She didn't offer him a seat. She didn't offer him a towel. She sat on the edge of the sofa, crossing her legs elegantly. Lucas remained standing by the fireplace, leaning against the stone mantel, watching Gavin with the relaxed alertness of a predator. "Do you remember 4 years ago, Gavin, when we were trying to conceive?" Evander asked. Gavin blinked, the question catching him off guard. "Yes, we went to the fertility clinic. Dr. Pembroke. We did the treatments. It worked." "It didn't work," Evander corrected gently. "Of course it did. We have Leo." "I have Leo," she said. "You have nothing to do with him." Gavin felt the room sway. "You're lying. I remember the appointment. The doctor said we had options." "The doctor told me the results while you were in the waiting room taking a business call," Evander said. "Dr. Iris Pembroke told me your motility was 0. You were sterile, Gavin, completely. There was no viable sperm. You could never father a child." "No." Gavin shook his head, a nervous laugh bubbling up. "That's impossible. I'm fine. The doctor would have told me." "I asked him not to," Evander said. "I asked him to let me break the news to you gently. But I never did. Because I knew you." Her eyes bore into his. "I knew how fragile your ego was. You defined yourself by your virility, by your legacy. If you knew you were broken in that way, you would have imploded. You would have become impossible to live with. So Leo." "I used a donor," Evander stated. "An anonymous donor from the clinic's registry. I underwent the procedure without telling you. I let you believe the vitamins and the timing had worked. I let you believe he was yours because I loved you, and I wanted to give you the family you claimed you wanted." Gavin looked at her, horror dawning on him. "You lied to me for 3 years?" "I protected your pride for 3 years," she shot back. "I built a world where you could feel like a king. And how did you repay me?" She stood up, walking over to the sidebar to pour more wine. Her hand was steady. "You stopped coming home. You started with the late nights at the office, then the perfume on your shirts, then Sienna. I tolerated it at first, Gavin. I told myself it was just the stress of the baby. I thought it was a phase." She turned back to him, the wine glass catching the firelight. "But then I found the laptop. You left it open on the kitchen island that Sunday night while you were in the shower. You thought I was just a dumb housewife who only cared about recipes." Gavin flinched. He remembered that night. "I saw the bank statements," she continued. "The embezzlement. You weren't just cheating on me. You were stealing from your company to fund it. You were risking our future, my security, and Leo's life for a 22-year-old assistant and a suite at the Hyatt." "So you destroyed me?" Gavin whispered, his voice trembling. "You took everything because I made a mistake?" "I protected myself," Evander corrected sharply. "I knew the FBI was coming. It was only a matter of time before the audit caught you. And when they came, they would seize everything. The house, the accounts, the cars. We would be left with nothing. Unless..." Gavin's mind raced to catch up. "Unless it was already gone," Evander finished. "I used the power of attorney you so arrogantly signed to shield your assets from litigation. I liquidated everything before the government could freeze it. I moved the money into irrevocable trusts for Leo, trusts you can't touch. I didn't steal it, Gavin. I saved it from being seized by the feds because of your crimes." "And him?" Gavin pointed a shaking finger at Lucas. "You saved yourself for him? Is that it? You've been screwing him this whole time?" Lucas let out a short, dry laugh. He shook his head, looking at the floor. Evander looked at Gavin with pure pity. "Gavin, look at him. Look at his face. Look at his eyes." Gavin looked. He saw the same blue eyes, the same structure of the nose. "Lucas is my brother," Evander said. Gavin's mouth fell open. "Your brother?" "Half-brother, to be exact," she said. "But you wouldn't know that. In 5 years of marriage, you never asked a single question about my family. You never asked where I came from. You just liked that I was quiet, that I had no baggage, and that I looked good on your arm at dinner parties. You didn't marry a person, Gavin. You married a mirror to admire yourself in." Gavin sank onto the ottoman, his legs no longer able to support him. The humiliation was total. He wasn't the victim. He wasn't the hero. He was the fool. "Where is Leo?" he asked again, his voice broken. "Please, I just want to see him. Even if he isn't mine. I raised him for 3 months. I held him." Evander's expression softened, but only slightly. It was the look one gives a wounded animal that needs to be put down. "Leo is safe, but you are not going to see him. Not tonight. Not ever." "You can't do that," Gavin wept. "I can," she said. "As of yesterday, the DNA results were submitted to the court along with the evidence of your embezzlement. You have no biological claim to him. You have no legal claim to him. And with your criminal record pending, no judge will ever let you near him." Gavin put his head in his hands. The heat of the room felt suffocating now. "So what happens now?" he mumbled into his palms. "You win. I have nothing. I'm broke. I'm stranded. Are you going to call the cops?" Evander didn't answer immediately. She looked past him, toward the large window that overlooked the driveway. "I don't have to," she said quietly. Gavin lifted his head. He followed her gaze. Outside, through the pines, the snowy darkness was being rhythmically slashed by strobes of red and blue light. They were silent, but they were bright. A caravan of vehicles was winding its way up the driveway. "They tracked your phone, Gavin," Evander said, her voice devoid of triumph. "Or rather, they tracked the prepaid debit card you used at the library to search for this address. The FBI has been looking for you for 3 days. I just let them know you'd arrived." Gavin watched the lights dance across the ceiling of the beautiful cabin he would never live in. He looked at Evander, the woman he thought was weak, the woman he thought was nothing without him. She stood tall, protected by her brother, secure in her fortune and free of him. He realized then that he hadn't just lost the game. He had never even understood the rules. Lucas moved away from the fireplace and opened the front door. The cold wind rushed in again, carrying the sound of car doors slamming and radios squawking. "Time to go, Gavin," Lucas said. Gavin stood up. He didn't look at Evander again. He couldn't bear to see the pity in her eyes. He walked toward the open door, toward the cold, and toward the end of his life. The end of Gavin Mercer's life as a free man didn't come with a bang or a desperate chase. It came with the quiet, metallic click of handcuffs in the biting Wyoming wind. As Officer Miller recited his rights, his breath pluming in the freezing air, Gavin didn't struggle. The fight had been drained out of him, left somewhere back on the rainy streets of Seattle. He was guided toward the flashing blue lights of the cruiser, his expensive Italian leather shoes slipping on the ice. A final indignity. Before he ducked his head to enter the back of the squad car, he looked back at the cabin one last time. Evander was still standing in the large picture window. The golden light of the fire framed her silhouette. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't cheering. She just watched him with a look of profound, exhausting relief, like someone watching a bag of trash finally being hauled away. She didn't wave. She simply turned her back and walked away, disappearing into the warmth he would never feel again. The trial that followed was a 4-month dissection of his ego. The federal courthouse in Seattle became his purgatory. Day after day, Gavin sat in his defendant's chair, forced to listen as the prosecution peeled back the layers of his life to reveal the rot underneath. The evidence was overwhelming, a mountain of digital paper trails that Evander had meticulously archived. She took the stand not as a scorned wife, but as a star witness. She was composed, articulate, and devastatingly precise. She recounted dates, times, and amounts without a hint of hesitation. The jury didn't see a vindictive ex. They saw a woman who had survived a financial predator. Then came Sienna. That was the knife twist Gavin hadn't expected. In exchange for immunity and a plea deal, his former mistress painted a picture of Gavin as a manipulative tyrant who coerced her into the scheme. She cried on the stand. Fake tears, Gavin knew, but the jury ate it up. She walked free. Gavin was handcuffed. The sentence was 8 years in a federal correctional institution in Oregon for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. When the gavel banged down, it sounded like the lid of a coffin slamming shut. 3 years later. Time moved differently inside the fences of the FCI Sheridan. It was a thick, sluggish substance that suffocated hope. The man who existed here wasn't Gavin Mercer, the VP of sales who wore bespoke suits and drank aged scotch. He was inmate 49-1. His hands, once manicured, were rough and dry. His hair was thinning rapidly, grey swallowing the dark brown at his temples. Gavin worked in the prison library. It was the best job inside, quiet, relatively clean, and free from the yard's violence. He spent his days shelving paperbacks and repairing spines with tape. It was humble work, a stark contrast to the multi-million-dollar logistics deals he used to broker. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the past came crashing back. Rico, a young inmate serving time for distribution, slid a glossy magazine across the metal circulation desk. It was the latest issue of Business Weekly, dog-eared and worn. "Hey, Mercer," Rico whispered, tapping the cover with a tattooed finger. "Ain't this that lady you won't shut up about? The ex?" Gavin looked down. His heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The headline was bold and imposing. "From housewife to mogul, how Evander Mercer built an empire from the ashes." There she was, Evander. She looked magnificent, radiating a kind of power Gavin had never seen in her when they were married. She was wearing a cream-colored power suit that probably cost more than Gavin's old Porsche. She was standing in front of a sleek, modern building, the headquarters for Phoenix Enterprises, a chain of high-end boutique daycares that had just gone national. But it wasn't Evander's success that made the air leave Gavin's lungs. It was the people standing with her. Holding her right hand was a toddler with curly hair and bright eyes. Leo. He looked happy, healthy, and completely unaware of the man rotting in a cell in Oregon. And on her left, Gavin brought the magazine closer, his hands trembling so violently the pages blurred. He blinked, trying to clear his vision, praying his mind was playing tricks on him. It wasn't. Standing next to Evander, with a hand possessively and comfortably resting on her waist, was a man in a sharp charcoal suit. He was smiling at the camera, looking every bit the proud partner. It was Arthur Pendergast, his family lawyer, the man Gavin had trusted with his secrets, the man who had told him, "I can't represent you anymore." Gavin read the caption, his lips moving silently. Evander Mercer, CEO, pictured with her fiancé, attorney Arthur Pendergast. The power couple credits their rapid success to smart investments and, as Evander puts it, cutting out the dead weight to focus on the future. The realization hit Gavin with the force of a physical blow to the gut. He slumped back in his plastic chair, the library spinning around him. Arthur hadn't just recused himself. He hadn't just followed the law. He had been waiting. Arthur had known about the embezzlement. He had likely guided Evander on exactly when to strike, exactly how to secure the power of attorney, and exactly how to legally lock Gavin out of his own life. They had played him, both of them. While Gavin was playing checkers, thinking he was the king of the board, they had been playing 4D chess. Gavin looked at the photo one last time, at the wife he underestimated and the lawyer he trusted, living the life he had built, with the money he had earned, raising the son he wanted. "Dead weight," he whispered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He closed the magazine, sliding it back across the desk to Rico. There was nothing left to say. There was no appeal to file, no clever maneuver to execute. The game was over, and he had lost pieces he didn't even know were on the board. Gavin picked up his rubber stamp, dipped it in the black ink, and went back to work. So, what is the lesson here? Gavin Mercer spent his life believing that power was about money, control, and the ability to deceive those closest to him. He mistook his wife's silence for stupidity and her kindness for weakness. But in the end, the person he underestimated the most was the architect of his destruction. He lost his fortune, his freedom, and a son that was never truly his, all because he couldn't keep his promises. Sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one shouting. It's the one listening, planning, and waiting for you to make a mistake. Wow, what a ride. If that twist at the end with the lawyer shocked you, hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were Evander? Was her revenge justified, or did she go too far? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I read every single one. And if you want more dramatic stories about betrayal, karma, and justice served cold, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.